The book is called Composed, The Heart and Science of Leading Under Pressure. And this content this morning is about that. And as we open up, I want to tell you a story. A few years ago, I got called by an executive who said, I'd love to have you come and work with my 200 sales leaders. They're going to come into town in Texas, and we're going to bring you in. I'd never met this guy face to face. His name was Alex. And he said, I'm going to bring you in to work with them. And all he had done is read my first book, and so he thought he was going to trust me with these people. We got to know each other just a little bit on the phone. And then he says, but I'd love to meet you and have you come and meet my family. He said my wife would be out of town, but I could meet my boys. And so I went down. I ended up going down. It was a Wednesday night. And I fly down to Austin, Texas, and I do this. It's a 2-day leading under pressure workshop like this, but over 2 days with these 200 folks. And so I do the 2 days, and I get to the Friday, and I go to Alex's house and have dinner with Alex and his 2 sons. And at one point, I do something strange when I travel, and I always pack my swim trunks. And the reason why I do that is because I really like hot tubs. I don't always use them. I don't have a hot tub. Some of you guys have a hot tub that you don't use. But my wife is not interested in a hot tub, but I'm always ready in case, the hotel might have a hot tub or whatever. So at one point I just said, hey, I noticed you got a hot tub. Any chance we could use the hot tub? So he said, sure, this is great. So at some point, awkwardly, we go out, we're having a great conversation in the hot tub, and 2 or 3 hours of just, life and family and faith and philosophy, and so we're having this great conversation. I need to rewind to Wednesday night. So I'm going to Austin for this moment, and when I pack my bags, I had this problem where the collars of my shirts would slide up underneath the lapel of my jacket. And so I remembered back to my childhood that my dad would get heavily starched shirts. And his shirts would come from the dry cleaner just like cardboard. And so I thought, this is my solution. So I got heavily starched shirts for the first time. I pack them in my bag and my swim trunks. So I get down there. I go into Thursday. I wake up Thursday morning. I put on my heavily starched shirt, my jacket, sure enough, collar's like standing up tall. I'm feeling good. I go into this session. And I don't know if you know what heavily starched shirts do to your chest, but about halfway into the day, my chest was so raw, I thought my nipples were bleeding. And I was spending, I'm not kidding, I remember just thinking, I will do anything I can to keep my starched shirt away from my chest. I go back to my hotel room that night, I was in pain. Some of you guys are runners, know what I'm talking about too. It doesn't take starched shirts, like marathon runners I know deal with this. And so I call down I'm like, there's no Walmart, I can't get t-shirts, I don't know, that's all I packed, starched shirts and my swim trunks. And so I called down to the concierge and I said, you guys have any Band-Aids? So they said, sure, come on down. So I go down to the concierge, and when I get down there, they had Band-Aids, but all they had was the little round pasty guys. So Friday morning I wake up, I slap on the Band-Aids. I go into Friday. I have one of the best days consulting with that group I've ever had. So much so, I forget everything else. It's like I was in a zone. Now fast forward to the hot tub. So I've been sitting there with my new friend for 2 or 3 hours talking about faith, life, personal junk, like work, all this stuff. And suddenly it occurs to me, I don't remember if I took those Band-Aids off. And we had been doing this like this too, waterline right about here. And so now I'm thinking, okay, so where's the good moment? So I look down, and sure enough, I'm wearing Band-Aids on my nipples. And then the milliseconds that pass next, I do not know what to do. I'm thinking, what do I say? I just started yelling. We've been sitting here having this great conversation about your work and how fun it was to work with your leaders and your life and all this stuff. And all this time, Alex, I have had Band-Aids on my nipples. And this is exactly what he said. I just thought it might have been cool in Seattle. And here's my point. What I have found when it comes to this concept, where we're going next, is that there are at least 2 kinds of leaders in the world. There are those who are spending most of their time trying to manage their Band-Aids, trying to cover up the wounds that they have or the insecurities that they have. And they're spending most of their emotional energy trying to do that. There are other leaders who are covered in wounds that are not only affecting them, but affecting everybody else, who are completely unaware and disconnected from that, and lack that awareness that there is something to pay attention to that actually is damaging the folks that I'm trying to lead, but I'm not aware that they're there, or I just lead on past them. And there might actually be something to put a Band-Aid on that they don't realize is there. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is which kind of person are you? One of the questions as we get into this that I get asked for so long is this question of what is pressure? Why is pressure in this at all? One of our best places that we feel this is when we fly. When you get on an airplane. When you get on an airplane and it begins to take off, there are indicators, aren't there, that there's pressure. So we feel it in our sinuses. We feel ourselves pushed back in the plane. We can hear the creaking of the suitcases above us. So there are some indicators, but those pressure indicators are invisible for the most part. And so I would suggest to you that what pressure is it's an invisible force that's telling us that something is changing. And it might be something that's actually changing outside of us, or it might be something that is changing within us. Because sometimes, you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we feel pressure that we're creating that we're like, I don't have any idea if anything is actually changing. I just am going crazy right now because I think everybody's looking at me. Or whatever it is that causes pressure for you. So that's that pressure feeling. And it's an important thing because I do care about you when things are going well, certainly, but I really care about you when things are going bad. I always ask, when I ask people, they actually have allowed me to do premarital counseling a couple times. And the first question I ask a couple is, how do you fight? And you know what's funny is some of them say, we don't. I'm like, that's so cool. It's so good. I'm like, may it always stay that way. If you do, let's talk about what that's going to be like. Because some people don't, but many of us do. And so figuring out how we're going to handle those pressure moments is so critical. Now, I want to also suggest to you that this concept, that there are certain points where our ability to manage the pressure matters more. And this is what's known as a sigmoid curve. And so if you have a piece of paper, it's kind of fun to draw this thing. But the idea would be that if you think about the patterns of life and work, that there are moments where something changes, and what it oftentimes feels like is things get worse for a little bit. And then typically when we kind of settle in, things will start to get better. Sometimes that curve is steep, sometimes it's more gradual, but things will start to get better. And then at some point, if we sit in it too long, we get a little bit bored, or things change again and things start to decline again, or we choose to do something else. And what I want to suggest to you, and this is mostly for those of you guys, just to become aware of these moments when that dip is beginning to occur. And so often it's when something is going to happen that's different. And that in those moments is where your capacity to stay true to who you are and connected to other people is most important. That right in that moment, it's most important. And that's why it becomes pretty challenging to do. The fundamental definition, for those of you guys that like definitions, here's the definition. And this concept that we're talking about is what's called differentiated leadership. So the definition is this. Differentiated leadership is about staying true to your convictions while staying connected to the convictions of others and avoiding the pressure to either make them feel better or to get tough. The first piece about, I think that makes sense, doesn't it? This stay true to my convictions and stay connected to what's important to them. My wife and I have a great marriage, 21 years of marriage, and we fight. So one of the, close relationships are an easy place to talk about. Because if we're in a conversation and something matters and we're disagreeing, how do I stay true to what's important to me and stay true to what's important to her? And if you think that's easy, I can almost guarantee if I talk to the people that you're leading, they would say, I've had so many people who come up to me and say, I've got this stuff figured out, but can we talk about this other thing? And I remember I was working with 500 high school football coaches, and this coach was like, I've been a firefighter, I've dealt with all kinds of trauma and pressure, so I got this figured out, but can we talk about this other thing? And his wife's standing behind him going. And so I would suggest to you that most leaders who think that this is easy, this takes some work to do this well. The last part is that people will sabotage our ability to do these two things well, even when it's better for them. Because if we try to be something different than what may be our default, people will want to push us back to what we were before. If you don't believe me and you're a horrible listener, go into your next team meeting and stop and just say this. So what do you guys think we should do? And you've never asked that question before. You know what Mary from your team is going to do when she goes out in the hall? She should be happy, right? Because you've been a horrible listener, but you finally checked in and you said, what do you think we should do? And then you shut up and you didn't say anything. She's probably going to go out in the hall because what you just did is you just triggered a new curve for her because you changed it. And she may go out in the hall and go up to Jim and say, Jim, I'm just going to assume your name's Gina. Do you trust Gina? Because something's weird's going on. She went to some workshop, and now she asked me how things are going, and she's never done that before. Do you still trust her? I mean, it's just we do this to people when they're trying to become a better version of themselves, and so that's what this is about. Just to go a little bit deeper with this is just on the self and other piece. We're used to this. In an ideal world, every one of us in this room, in every high-pressure moment, would have the capacity to maintain a healthy attention to what's important to us. We would speak the truth in appropriate moments, but we would speak the truth as we perceive it. And we would also have an ability to be connected to other people, to maintain peace, to maintain sort of harmony with the team, and we would be doing these two things at once. This is awesome. And then all of us would be, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we would all have some sense of our own competence, of the community that surrounds us. We'd be in a culture that supports what I just described, and we also would have a character that would be willing to edit. Sounds like a nice world. But here's what happens for most of us, is that what happens is, for some of us, instead of this balance being there, we have what I describe as a habitual, I'm going to say most of us, a habitual way, a habit of response. And so for some of us, the truth side gets really big under pressure. When the pressure comes on, what we're going to hear is a lot of you. Okay, and you know leaders like this. The benefit of a leader like this, and there are benefits, you know where they stand, right? You know what they're going to do because you've seen it before. There's strength and conviction, and we like conviction. We follow that. The downside is that this person has a decreased capacity to pay attention to anything else that anyone else is going to say. So this is one possibility for some of us. For others of us, it's not about that truth speaking, but what happens is that the peacekeeping side gets really big under pressure. And so what becomes really important is making sure everyone else is happy and feeling good. There's another way to describe this as a peacemonger. So we become, peace is the most important thing. And the benefit of this person, the awesome leader, this is the person you want to go to lunch with, right? Because they're actually going to ask you a question at lunch. They're going to listen to you. They're going to care. The downside of being this kind of person and working with them is that you cannot make everyone happy when it matters most, when there's pressure, without lying to somebody. And there are famous leaders in history who were great leaders who this tendency affected how everyone else was functioning. So the idea would be that what if we could do these two things at once? That would be the goal. That would be the goal, to move into this space where instead of being truth speakers or peacekeepers or disappearing is another possibility. You guys know some people like this where they just they're in the room but they're not there. Instead of that, to be people that are convicted, that are connected, and most importantly, probably that are present. Like, what if we could stand well in the midst of the storm and stand more effectively there? And that's what this content is all about.